They came in the dead of night, not with blaring war horns or grand displays of power, but with cold precision and the quiet hum of starship engines slipping past our defenses. The Exelnari called themselves healers, a species devoted to medicine, progress, and the preservation of life. When they first made contact, they extended their hands in peace, and humanity, ever hopeful, believed them. We shared our knowledge, opened our worlds, and invited them into our cities. They studied our doctors, marveled at our ingenuity, and promised a golden era of interstellar cooperation. Then the betrayals began. Hospitals fell silent. Entire research stations went dark overnight. The brightest minds of Earth, our surgeons, geneticists, and biotechnologists, vanished without a trace. One by one, the greatest medical institutions were torn apart, their knowledge stolen, their personnel erased. The Exelnari had never come to heal. They came to harvest. It wasn't war in the traditional sense. There were no burning cities, no battlefields littered with bodies. It was a scalpel-thin invasion, precise and methodical. They weren't here to fight nations or destroy armies. They were here to cripple humanity at its core. They took our healers, our ability to rebuild, to recover, to survive. In the eyes of the Exelnari, we were nothing more than a resource, a species to be dissected and discarded. For months, we searched for them, tracking the silent whispers of stolen data and lost transmissions. What we found chilled us to the bone. Deep beyond the outer colonies, far from prying eyes, the Exelnari had established facilities, massive orbital stations, where our doctors were imprisoned, forced to work like slaves. Those who resisted were not executed. That would have been merciful. Instead, they were subjected to their own craft, turned into subjects for grotesque experiments, reduced to living test cases for alien science. Humanity had seen genocide before. We had endured wars, famine, and the cruelty of our own kind. But this was different. This was an attack on our future, a slow, calculated murder of everything we had built. And so, we made a decision. If the Exelnari had come to take our healers, we would send something else in return. They had studied our kindness, our compassion, our relentless desire to preserve life. But they had overlooked something buried deep in our history. When peace is shattered and mercy is met with slaughter, humanity does not simply lie down and die. We adapt. We evolve. And when backed into a corner, we unleash the only thing more terrifying than extinction. We sent the angels of death. They weren't soldiers in the traditional sense. They were specialists operatives forged in the darkest corners of human warfare. They moved like shadows, spoke in whispers, and struck like phantoms. Some were cybernetically enhanced, others clad in exosuits laced with cutting-edge stealth technology. All of them carried the same purpose: deliver judgment. The mission was simple: erase the Exelnari from existence, not through brute force, but through the very methods they had used against us. Silent, precise, unstoppable. The first facility fell in less than an hour. Security teams never saw them coming. The Exelnari had built their prisons under the assumption that humans were weak, that without their healers, they would crumble. They never expected the response. The angels didn't just extract our people, they dismantled the entire operation from within, leaving behind nothing but echoes and scorched ruins. The second target was even easier. By the time the Exelnari realized they were being hunted, half of their medical outposts had gone silent. Their stolen knowledge was returned to us, their twisted experiments undone. And then, the real message was sent. On the bridge of their largest station, under flickering emergency lights and the cold weight of inevitability, the Exelnari commanders stood trembling before a single human operative. No weapon was drawn, no threats were issued. The angel merely spoke in a voice colder than the void itself. You took our healers. Now we take everything. The feed went dark. The last Exelnari stronghold burned within the hour. The war was over before it had truly begun. The Exelnari learned the lesson that every species before them had failed to understand. Humanity is not just a species of dreamers and builders. We are survivors. We are warriors. And when you take the ones who save lives, you force us to send the ones who end them. Somewhere, among the silent wreckage of their fallen empire, the remaining Exilnari surely wondered what had gone wrong. Why had their careful, calculated invasion unraveled so quickly? Why had the humans responded with such overwhelming precision? They would never understand. Because they never realized the truth. We never wanted a war. We wanted peace. We wanted unity. We wanted to believe in the better angels of our nature. But when you take everything from us, when you strike at the heart of what makes us human, there is only one answer. You sent for our healers. We sent the angels of death. The silence didn't last. For a moment, it seemed as if humanity had delivered its message that the Exilnari would vanish into the abyss, taking their crimes with them. But wars, even the quiet ones, never truly end that easily. The angels of death had done their work too well. What was meant to be a surgical campaign had spiraled into something far greater. The Exilnari were not the only ones watching. From the fringes of known space, old enemies stirred. The Dominion, the bureaucratic monstrosity that ruled over 100 worlds with cold efficiency, had taken note. The Ratesh, their enforcers, had begun moving in the dark. Even the Valor, the empire that had once sought to subjugate Earth, hesitated at the implications. They had all seen what happened when humanity was provoked. What was once a promising civilization of diplomats, explorers, and dreamers had turned into something far more dangerous. Yet, for all the fear and respect our retribution had earned, one truth remained. The Exilnari were not finished. Deep space surveillance picked up the first anomalies within days of the final strike. Faint energy signatures, encrypted transmissions bouncing between dead relays, ghost signals slipping through black market channels. They were rebuilding. Somewhere, out there in the void, the Exilnari had something left, something more than just stolen knowledge and shattered pride. It wasn't just a remnant force trying to reclaim what had been lost. This was something different, something desperate. Wyatt Nash had spent years fighting ghosts. He had been one of the first to see what the Exilnari were capable of, back when no one believed they were a threat. He had stood on the decks of abandoned hospital ships, staring at bloodstains that told stories no survivor could. He had walked through the ruins of once thriving research colonies, their halls silent, their purpose erased. He knew what the Exilnari did to those they captured. He knew why they had come. But what haunted him now was the thing no one could explain. At first, it seemed like another false lead. A single distress signal, weak and erratic, buried in the background radiation of a dying star system. Standard protocol would have been to flag it, mark it for later investigation. But there was something about this one, something deliberate. It wasn't calling for help. It was a warning. The message contained no words, no data logs, no desperate cries for salvation. Just a series of coordinates and a repeating pulse in old Earth code, one that hadn't been used in centuries. It was a message from one of our own. The angels of death moved without hesitation. A small strike team, no more than 6, was deployed aboard the Vindicator, an old but reliable stealth frigate. Their mission was simple: get in, locate the source of the transmission, and extract whoever had sent it. If it was a trap, they would dismantle it. If it was a survivor, they would bring them home. Either way, they would not leave empty-handed. But when they arrived, the system was already dead. The planet below was little more than a graveyard, its surface scorched, its cities reduced to skeletal remains. Whatever had happened here had not been quick. There were no orbital wrecks, no debris fields suggesting a battle. The Exilnari had come like they always did, quietly, methodically. But something was different this time. They had not just taken what they wanted. They had erased every trace that humanity had ever been here. The distress signal led them to a facility buried beneath the planet's surface. Human architecture unmistakable. An old research outpost, the kind that had once pioneered the very medical advancements the Exilnari coveted. But it wasn't abandoned. Something was still active inside. The doors were open, the security systems disabled. Not by force, but by intent. Someone had left them a path forward. Wyatt and his team advanced with precision, their weapons primed, their eyes scanning every shadow. The air was still, the corridors lined with dormant machines and silent terminals. Then, at the heart of the facility, they found it. A single stasis pod. Inside, a human figure intact, alive, but wired into the pod systems in ways that defied explanation. Tubes ran from their arms, cybernetic nodes embedded into their skull. The readouts displayed a name, one that sent a cold wave through every soldier in the room. Dr. Elias Voss. He had been one of the first taken. A genius in genetic engineering, a mind that had once been at the forefront of medical advancement. He had disappeared with the others, assumed to be another victim of the Excelnari's brutal experiments. Yet here he was, preserved, waiting. The moment they began the extraction process, the facility systems came alive. Lights flickered, alarms blared, and an automated voice, human but distorted, spoke through the speakers. "They are coming. You must leave." The team barely had time to react before the first tremors shook the ground. From orbit, the Vindicator registered multiple incoming signatures, ships emerging from the black, sleek, and unfamiliar. Not Excelnari. Not Dominion. Not anything that should have existed in this sector. Something else had been waiting. As the pod's locks disengaged, Dr. Voss's eyes snapped open. There was no confusion, no panic, just a single word, spoken with the certainty of a man who had seen what lay beyond the edge of the known. Run. But it was already too late. Wyatt barely had time to curse before the first impact struck the facility. Dust and debris rained from the ceiling as distant explosions rocked the underground structure. The Vindicator's warning flared in his earpiece, unknown hostiles inbound, fast. They weren't just being tracked. They had been expected. He grabbed Dr. Voss by the arm, half dragging the weakened scientist as his squad moved with practiced efficiency. No one hesitated. No one asked questions. The rule of Black Ops was simple when things went sideways. You ran first, then figured out why. But Voss wasn't moving like a man who'd been locked in stasis for years. His breathing was steady, his steps controlled. Whatever the Excelnari had done to him, it hadn't left him broken. It had changed him. Outside, the sky was already burning. The unknown fleet had arrived in force sleek ships, with no known signature, no affiliation. Not Excelnari. Not Dominion. Not anything the Vindicator's AI could classify. They moved with precision, dropping into tight formations, cutting off escape routes before the team could even reach the extraction point. Then the first energy bolts came screaming down. Wyatt threw himself forward as a blast vaporized the ground behind him. Kaler, his second-in-command, was already barking orders, directing suppressive fire that did little more than buy them seconds. The enemy wasn't even returning fire directly. They were shepherding them, forcing them back toward the ruins. Wyatt knew a trap when he saw one. They made it to cover, the remains of a collapsed research dome, its walls half melted from whatever had happened here before. Voss staggered against a console, gripping his head, his expression twisted in something between concentration and pain. "They know I'm awake," he muttered. Wyatt snapped toward him. "Who? The Excelnari?" Voss shook his head. "No. Worse." The squad's comms flared. A new transmission cut through the chaos broadband, open frequency. Not human. Not Excelnari. A voice like shifting metal and distant echoes spoke in flawless English. "We see you, remnants of the lost ones. We offer no war. We offer no mercy. Return what was taken." No one needed to ask what they meant. Wyatt's grip tightened on his weapon. "Yeah? You want him?" He glanced at Voss. "Then come and get him." The sky answered. 3 figures descended, dropping from above without ships, without jetpacks, just gravity-defying precision. Their forms shifted mid-air, metallic bodies flowing like liquid, their limbs adjusting as they landed in perfect synchronization. Not Excelnari. Not anything human. The squad raised their weapons. The lead figure stepped forward. A humanoid silhouette, its face shifting between featureless metal and something disturbingly familiar, human eyes, but hollow, flickering like dying embers. "Your kind was never meant to wake him." Voss exhaled slowly, then it's too late for all of us. Wyatt didn't hesitate. Light him up. Gunfire erupted, the sound ripping through the ruins, but Wyatt already knew this wasn't going to be enough. This wasn't just another enemy. This was something older, something that had been waiting in the dark. And now, because humanity had refused to be prey, because they had fought back against the Excelnari's twisted experiments, they had woken something far, far worse. And it wasn't here to negotiate. The first shots did nothing. The rounds struck their forms, punching through their shifting metallic skin, but there was no blood, no hesitation, just a ripple across their bodies as the damage closed up as if nothing had happened. Wyatt had fought against the best killers the Dominion had thrown at humanity, had seen the horrors of war against species designed to hunt them down, but this was something else entirely. This wasn't just advanced technology. This was a force that had adapted far beyond conventional physics. The lead figure moved first. One moment, it was standing there, and the next, it blurred forward, covering 10 meters in the blink of an eye. Rhaegor barely had time to react before it hit him. There was no forceful impact, no bone-crushing slam, just contact, and then his body was thrown backward like a rag doll, his armor caving in as if reality itself had buckled around him. Kaler reacted instantly, dropping a flash charge while Saren IV unleashed a blast from his heavy repeater. The explosion rocked the ruins, but the figure barely slowed. It flickered, as if existing in two places at once, then reappeared closer, its hand reaching toward Voss. Wyatt moved before he could think. He threw his shoulder into the scientist, knocking him out of reach as the enemy's fingers grazed his armor. His heads-up display flickered, the sensors shutting down in an instant. Something cold and wrong passed through his body, like his atoms were being rewritten at a molecular level, but then it was gone. He hit the ground hard, rolling to his feet, heart pounding. The second figure moved to flank them, but Kaler was already ahead of it. He slid into position, planting a gravity mine between them and their attackers. The explosion erupted in a localized singularity, warping the air and sending dust and debris spiraling inward. The figure twisted, caught in the pole, but instead of being torn apart, it adapted its body, stretching, shifting, until it simply stepped through the effect, untouched. "That's impossible," Saren IV growled. Wyatt gritted his teeth. "Then we make it possible." He switched to ultra-thermic rounds, the kind designed to burn through even Dominion war armor. The squad followed suit. This time, when they fired, the rounds didn't just pass through their forms resisted. They weren't invincible. They could adapt, but there was a threshold. They could be forced to keep up. Voss was muttering under his breath, gripping his head, his face pale. They're not just reacting. They're learning. Every second we fight them, they're rewriting themselves. If we don't end this fast, the air shifted. A low, thrumming sound filled the ruins, a frequency just below the edge of hearing. Wyatt felt it in his bones before he saw it. Something was activating. The ground beneath them began to glow, the ancient structures responding to whatever these things were. And then Voss changed. His eyes snapped open, glowing with the same strange flickering light as the enemy. His voice came out strained, distorted. "We need to go. Now." Kaler didn't hesitate. He grabbed Voss, pulling him toward the extraction route. Wyatt and the others laid down covering fire, forcing the enemy back step by step. They weren't retreating, but they weren't pressing forward either. They were watching, calculating. And then, for the first time, the lead figure spoke again. Not through open comms. Not through translation. Directly into their heads. "This game ends soon, lost ones." The sky above them shattered. The alien fleet, the one that had been holding position, unleashed its full payload. But the weapons weren't aimed at them. The ground cracked, the ruins splitting apart as something massive began to rise from beneath something buried long before the Excelnari, long before any known empire. A war machine. A construct of impossible scale. And it was waking up. The ruins crumbled as the construct emerged, an impossible monolith of interwoven black metal and shifting energy. It was ancient, older than the war, older than the Dominion, older than anything recorded in human or Excelnary history. It didn't rise like a machine, it unfolded, as if space itself was peeling back to reveal something that had been waiting all along. The enemy forces stood motionless, their glowing forms flickering erratically, as if even they didn't expect this. Wyatt didn't wait to find out what it was. "Fall back, now." Kaler hauled Voss over his shoulder, the scientist barely conscious. Sarin 4 and Rhaegor laid down cover fire, but the enemy wasn't attacking anymore. They were watching. Waiting. The realization made Wyatt's stomach twist. This wasn't just a battlefield. It was a test. And they had just triggered something far beyond their control. The air crackled, static washing over their comms. Then the construct spoke, not in an alien tongue, not in some incomprehensible frequency, in flawless human English. Confirmed, human presence detected. Commencing activation protocol. The enemy forces reacted instantly. They turned in unison, their forms flickering, and then they ran. Not toward the humans, but away. Wyatt had never seen anything like it. The Dominion never retreated. These creatures never hesitated. And yet they were abandoning the battlefield entirely, vanishing in bursts of shimmering distortion. That's when the construct shifted again. And Wyatt understood. It wasn't just a weapon. It wasn't a relic of some forgotten empire. It was theirs. Humanity had built this. A shudder ran through the ground as massive conduits snapped into place, buried reactors roaring to life. The construct's surface pulsed, forming intricate patterns of long-lost human design. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just old, it was waiting for them. Kaler let out a ragged breath. "You've got to be kidding me." Then the construct's voice changed. "Warning, external override detected. Control system compromised. Rewriting operational directives." Wyatt's blood ran cold. The enemy hadn't run out of fear. They had already won. The construct's inner core pulsed, shifting from its deep human blue to the eerie, flickering gold of the enemy's own form. A system corruption. A takeover. They hadn't found a weapon to use against the invaders. They had handed it to them. A deep, resonant hum built within the structure, growing louder by the second. Not an activation. A targeting lock. It was aiming at Earth. Wyatt grabbed his comm, voice raw with urgency. "Command, we've got a problem. The artifact is compromised. Repeat. The artifact is compromised. It's theirs now." Static. Then, finally, a voice broke through. Not from command. Not from the fleet. From deep space. "Incorrect. You are not alone." A second rupture tore through the battlefield. Wyatt turned just in time to see something break through real space. Something unlike any known ship. Massive, jagged, burning with ancient energy. Not Dominion. Not Excelnary. Not the enemy. The voice continued. "Stand down, soldier. We are the firstborn. And we are taking back what is ours." The air vibrated with a force that wasn't wind, wasn't sound, something deeper, something ancient waking for the first time in millennia. The firstborn ship moved with an unnatural grace, a vessel not bound by conventional physics, but by something else entirely. Wyatt barely had time to process what they were seeing before his comm crackled again. "You must sever the link." The construct's core pulsed brighter, the Dominion's corruption fully embedded now. If it fired, Earth would be gone. Not a city. Not a continent. The entire world. And the enemy had planned it this way. They had waited, let humanity dig up their own executioner, and now it was too late to stop it unless they did something impossible. Kaler wiped blood from his forehead, breathing hard. "We can't fight that thing, Wyatt." Wyatt wasn't so sure. He turned to Sarin 4. "You're linked into the Blacknet. Is there a way to bypass the override?" Sarin's cybernetic eye flickered. "I can't hack something this old. It's not connected to our networks." Rhaegor's voice cut in. "Then we don't hack it. We break it." Wyatt's gut told him the same thing. The construct was a machine, but it had a core, and cores could be destroyed. The firstborn ship drifted closer, its hull crackling with raw energy. Then, without warning, it spoke not in words, but in raw understanding. We built the forge. We watched your kind rise. And now, you will finish what we could not. The forge. That was what the construct had been called before time erased it. And if the firstborn couldn't stop it, then humanity had no choice but to take their place. Wyatt didn't hesitate. We plant charges at the core. Surin, you're with me. Kalor, Rhaegar, get Voss back to the ship and prep the Black ship's main gun. If we can't destroy the core from inside, we'll hit it from orbit. Kalor hesitated, just for a second. You sure about this? Wyatt didn't answer. He wasn't sure about any of this. But they had no time left. They sprinted into the heart of the forge. The corridors pulsed with golden energy, shifting as if the structure itself was alive. Every step sent a wave of unease through Wyatt's mind. This wasn't just a machine. It was thinking, adapting. The Dominion corruption was spreading faster now, every surface flickering with foreign glyphs. Soren 4 pointed ahead. There. The core chamber opened before them. A massive sphere of light, surrounded by shifting mechanical tendrils. The heart of the weapon. The heartbeat of their destruction. Wyatt unhooked the charges. Set 'em fast. We get one shot. Soren knelt, his hands moving with surgical precision, planting the explosives along the conduits. The hum of the forge deepened. It knew what they were doing. Then the voice returned. Not the firstborn. Not the Dominion. You cannot stop this. The words weren't a threat. They were a statement of fact. And then the room collapsed. The walls twisted, the core's energy spiking. Wyatt grabbed Saren and threw him clear just as a wave of force hurled them both against the far wall. The charges, half of them were ripped free, disintegrated in the maelstrom. The forge was fighting back. And it was winning. Wyatt forced himself up. His vision swam, blood dripping from a cut on his temple. The comm buzzed in his ear. Wyatt, the ship's in position. We don't have time. A shadow moved at the edge of his vision. Not Dominion. Not human. A figure stepped forward, silhouetted against the core's blinding light. Tall. Familiar. Wrapped in armor that had no place in this century. A human. But not from Earth. And in their hand, a weapon of impossible design, one aimed directly at Wyatt's head. The truth hit him like a sledgehammer. The firstborn hadn't come to help. They had come to take back what was theirs. Wyatt didn't move. The firstborn warrior held his aim steady, watching him the way a predator measured its prey. Behind them, the forge's core pulsed wildly, the Dominion's corruption still spreading, the entire structure seconds from turning Earth into ash. Soren 4 was still alive, barely, struggling to reach the remaining charges. They were out of time. Wyatt gritted his teeth. You're human. The warrior's expression didn't change. We were. 1,000 questions burned through Wyatt's mind, but none of them mattered. Not now. He pointed to the core. You want to take it? Fine. But it's dying. We don't stop this. We all burn. For the first time, hesitation. A flicker of something, doubt? Regret? The warrior turned slightly, taking in the collapsing chamber. The forge wasn't meant for this. Whatever it had been before, the Dominion had twisted it beyond salvation. It couldn't be reclaimed. Only destroyed. Wyatt clenched his fists. Decide. The warrior lowered their weapon. Then, without a word, they moved fast. They reached Saren, lifting him like he weighed nothing, then pointed to the core. You have one shot. Wyatt didn't waste it. He grabbed the detonator from Saren's belt, set the charges manually. The forge screamed in protest, but he ignored it. He turned, met Saren's exhausted gaze. Time to go. They ran. The corridors collapsed behind them. The firstborn warrior moved ahead, impossibly fast, guiding them through shifting paths like they had walked them before. The exit loomed a jagged tier in the structure where the black ship waited, its engines already burning. Wyatt hit his comm. "Vadran, light it up." The ship's main gun fired. The world turned white. Wyatt woke to silence. The black ship's med bay hummed softly, the only sound his own breathing. His body ached, but he was alive. That counted for something. Soren 4 sat nearby, his cybernetic eye flickering. The forge is gone. Wyatt exhaled, relief and exhaustion mixing in equal measure. Earth? Safe. For now. Kaler entered, arms crossed. "You might want to see this." Wyatt followed them to the bridge. The main display flickered on, showing the wreckage of the forge, nothing left but drifting debris. But beyond it, something else. Ships. Not Dominion. Not human. Firstborn. Their fleet had arrived. Wyatt braced for impact, for another fight, another war. But then the transmission came through. A single message. "We remember." The screen went dark. The firstborn ships turned, vanishing into deep space. For the first time in a long, long while, Wyatt let himself breathe. Humanity had won. Not just the battle. Not just the war. They had endured. And whatever came next, they'd be ready.